The freezing rain didn't just fall this afternoon. It lashed relentlessly against the moss-covered wood of our front porch, like an angry entity trying to break down the door. It was the kind of bitter, gray winter day that completely drains the color from the world. The damp chill seeped right through my heavy winter coat and settled deep into my bones. I pushed the stiff front door open and practically collapsed inside, kicking off my muddy work boots. My legs felt like solid lead. I was entirely exhausted, worn down to the absolute marrow. My shoulders ached sharply from a long morning of tending to the vegetable beds out back. I had spent hours cleaning the outdoor fish ponds, while the biting wind whipped across my face. I am naturally a guy who runs on relentless high energy. I genuinely believe in building a prosperous life from the ground up. I pride myself on learning fast and facing brutal challenges head-on without flinching. I constantly tell myself that failure is just another stepping stone, nothing to ever be afraid of. But as I stepped into the dim, drafty living room today, all my fierce optimism slammed into a solid brick wall. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, was curled into a tight, defensive ball in the far corner of the room. She had her knees pulled tightly against her chest. Her small, fragile arms were wrapped aggressively around her legs. Her eyes were completely vacant, staring blankly at a dark knot in the hardwood floor. She had been locked in this heavy, agonizingly silent trauma for weeks now. The anxiety and the unspoken emotional wounds had wrapped around her bright spirit, like a suffocating, invisible chain. I felt a massive, familiar knot of parental guilt twist violently in my stomach. I didn't have the disposable income for those high-end, elite behavioral therapy clinics the school psychologists kept casually recommending. I was grinding every single day, pushing myself to the absolute physical limit. I was pouring my soul into building an online business, hustling late into the night to achieve real financial freedom. I wanted to ensure she would never have to worry about the crushing cost of living. But right now, standing in this freezing, empty-feeling room, the promise of future wealth couldn't buy her a single second of peace. I wiped the cold, stinging rain from my face with my rough, calloused hands. I took a deep, shaky breath to steady my own racing heart. I promised myself I would never let her sink completely into this dark, silent abyss. I am a man who does exactly what he says he will do. I looked around the sparse room, my mind racing, completely desperate for any kind of lifeline to throw her. That is exactly when the dull gleam of polished wood caught my eye from the shadows. Half hidden behind a stack of old moving boxes in the dark corner of the room was my old acoustic guitar. It was a vintage, mahogany dreadnought that I used to play every single day. It had been sitting there, gathering a thick, gray coat of dust for years. I had abandoned my musical passion because the heavy burden of providing food, shelter, and security had consumed every waking hour of my existence. I walked over and gently wiped the thick dust off the delicate soundboard with the sleeve of my damp flannel shirt. The wood felt freezing cold to the touch, yet strangely familiar and incredibly welcoming in my hands. I didn't sit on the comfortable sofa. Instead, I carried the heavy instrument over and sat right down on the bare, rough wooden floor. I positioned myself just a few feet away from where Lily was huddled in her misery. She didn't look up at me. She didn't even blink or acknowledge my presence in any way. I didn't push her or force her to make eye contact. I just rested the large body of the guitar against my chest and started turning the cold brass tuning pegs. The old, rusty strings let out a sharp, metallic groan of protest as I tightened them. I kept tweaking them patiently, listening intently to the pitch. I was relying entirely on muscle memory from a lifetime ago to find the perfect tension. Finally, I pressed my calloused fingertips against the worn fretboard and struck a solid, full G chord. The deep, resonant vibration of the mahogany wood instantly broke through the oppressive, heavy silence of the room. It wasn't just a simple auditory sound. It was a physical, rolling wave of pure warmth that actually seemed to push back the bitter winter chill hanging in the air. I began to play a slow, incredibly steady chord progression. I kept my eyes locked on her tiny, rigid shoulders. They were incredibly tense, holding in a massive mountain of unspoken fear and confusion. I kept the rhythm perfectly consistent, steady, and reliable, as a healthy, calm heartbeat. There is a profound, documented science to this kind of natural acoustic therapy. The raw, organic vibration of real wood and steel acts as a physical anchor for a spiraling, panicked nervous system. It gives an anxious, overwhelmed mind something tangible and incredibly safe to hold on to. It is far better and more effective than any sterile, beeping medical machine ever could be. I didn't try to sing or speak to her with words. I just poured every single ounce of my fierce, protective love into those vibrating metal strings. I wasn't trying to be an impressive performer. I was just a desperate father, going to war for his little girl's fragile peace of mind. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, her glassy eyes shifted away from the floorboards. They finally landed on my moving, calloused hands. The deep bass notes seemed to literally vibrate through the wooden floor and straight into her small body. I could see the frantic, shallow breathing in her chest begin to slow down. Her breathing gradually began to perfectly match the deliberate tempo of my strumming. The agonizing tension in her jaw started to visibly soften. This pure, unfiltered frequency was bypassing her logical, terrifying fears and speaking directly to her wounded spirit. What is the most powerful, healing piece of music or melody that has ever rescued you from a dark, anxious place? I swear to you right now, I will liberate my home and my child's life from every shackle of sadness and trauma. I will use the simple, rustic melody of a father's love to ignite the most abundant flame of peace in her heart. Hit that subscribe button to join our frequency of healing and walk this journey with us. I kept my hand moving in that steady, unbroken rhythm. Down, down, up, down. The repetitive motion was almost hypnotic. The rich, warm tone of the acoustic guitar completely filled the empty space in our drafty living room. For the first time in weeks, the heavy, suffocating silence was finally broken. I didn't rush the tempo or try to play anything overly complicated. I knew that a traumatized mind is like a wild, frightened animal trapped in a corner. If you move too fast, or if you push too hard, it will just retreat further into the dark. So I just sat there on the hard floor, letting the raw vibration of the instrument do the heavy lifting. Then, something incredibly beautiful and entirely unexpected happened. Lily slowly uncurled her fragile arms from around her knees. She didn't stand up, but she began to gently scoot herself across the rough wooden floorboards. Inch by agonizing inch, she moved out of the shadows and closer to me. She finally stopped when she was right beside my right leg. She gently rested her small, weary head against my shoulder. I could actually feel her tiny body trembling at first, vibrating with all that pent-up fear. But then, she reached out one small hand and placed her palm flat against the curved wooden side of the guitar. She was physically feeling the deep vibration of the sound waves traveling through the wood. There is a deep, fundamental science behind why this organic acoustic connection works so well. When a human being is suffering from severe anxiety, their internal rhythm is completely chaotic and unpredictable. Their heartbeat is erratic, and their delicate nervous system is locked in a constant, exhausting state of overwhelming panic. But organic sound waves, exactly like the ones produced by real aged wood and vibrating steel strings, have a very specific biological frequency. It is called acoustic resonance. When a child leans against that vibrating wood, their erratic heartbeat naturally begins to synchronize with the steady, rhythmic pulse of the music. It physically forces the entire nervous system to slow down and regulate itself. It physically untangles all those deep, agonizing knots of anxiety, without needing a single complex medical word spoken. It is a natural, rustic therapy that reaches deep into a child's soul to heal those silent, invisible wounds, better than anything else. How does sitting on the floor, playing real music with your child compare to just handing them a toxic, mindless smartphone to stare at all day? Please drop a brief, respectful comment below and tell me your thoughts on this profound family connection. May blessings and sweet warmth reach every lonely, shivering soul out in the cold tonight. Hit that subscribe button to become a loving piece of our big family. As I kept playing that simple chord progression, I felt Lily's shallow breathing completely synchronize with mine. Her body, which had been as stiff as a frozen board for weeks, finally went entirely limp and relaxed against my side. The harsh, freezing winter rain was still aggressively pounding against the glass windows right behind us. The bitter wind was still howling relentlessly through the cracks in the old front door, but inside this tiny, glowing circle of acoustic sound, it felt exactly like the middle of a warm, golden summer afternoon. She started to gently sway her small shoulders back and forth. She was rocking perfectly in time with the rustic, comforting melody. I kept my eyes closed, just silently thanking God for this small, fragile, yet incredibly powerful moment of peace. And then, I heard it. It started as a very soft, hesitant hum coming from deep in her chest. It was so incredibly quiet at first that I thought I might just be imagining it over the loud sound of the rain. But the hum slowly grew louder, confidently finding its pitch against the vibration of the guitar strings. Then, her soft lips parted, and she actually began to sing out loud. Her voice was incredibly pure, innocent, and entirely unburdened by the weight of the world. It was a simple, old lullaby I used to sing to her when she was just a tiny baby in my arms. Her clear, angelic voice drifted up toward the ceiling, completely shattering the lingering gray shadows in the room. It cut right through the bitter chill of the winter afternoon. It completely banished the terrifying, unspoken monsters that had been silently haunting her fragile mind for so long. I opened my eyes, and my vision instantly blurred with heavy, hot tears. I couldn't stop them from falling down my face. And honestly, I didn't even try to hide them. I stopped strumming the guitar, letting the final, beautiful, resonant chord ring out and slowly fade into the cold air. I immediately dropped the heavy instrument onto the floor and wrapped both of my strong arms tightly around my little girl. She threw her arms around my neck and squeezed me back with a desperate, fierce strength that I didn't know she still had. She buried her face deep in my shoulder, and I could feel her genuinely smiling against my damp work shirt. We both just sat there on the hard, dusty floor, holding onto each other, laughing softly and freely through our tears. We were completely radiant with a sudden, overwhelming sense of pure, unfiltered happiness. In that exact moment, every single ounce of my physical exhaustion and mental burnout completely vanished into thin air. The agonizing stress of my failing bank accounts, the endless late-night hustle to build an online business, the paralyzing fear of our future, none of it mattered at all. I realized something incredibly profound sitting right there in the dust with my daughter. We spend so much of our short lives frantically chasing financial freedom, thinking that money will somehow build an impenetrable fortress around our children. We foolishly think that expensive behavioral therapies and elite, high-priced doctors are the only valid way to fix a broken heart. But the absolute, undeniable truth is that raw, organic music, perfectly combined with the fierce, unwavering power of a father's love, is the greatest medicine on this entire earth. It is the most sacred, undeniable healing force that exists in this chaotic world, and you absolutely cannot buy it with $1 million. The rustic wooden guitar chased away the bitter wind, and my daughter's pure voice warmed this single father's resilient heart.